Correct.
Oh, oh,
So I haven't talked to Jen. She might be a little late, maybe. She had to in a class, yeah, so.
so Monica's gonna set it all up for us.
Monica.
You're a technology person.
Well. Are you? Yeah,
There
it is.
Oh, I just have it set up to record. I'm gonna start it and then take my notes based off the recording, because I have class in 30 minutes.
Oh, good.
I have a break, so I can at least get you started.
Perfect. Do we use Teams or Zoom?
Zoom.
Zoom, because I think both of them have a AI widget that will take notes for you.
It does, but it's not good because you guys all talk really soft. And so everything comes out and the words are really skewed and all of that. Yeah.
You'll be able to hear me for sure.
But yeah, so I think if you want to wait till 6, I've had 1 or 2 people ask me about the meeting. That's the only thing I would practice this.
That worked.
I haven't
2
seen
minutes
them.
away.
I haven't seen them show up yet, but I am controlling it off my laptop in my office, so.
Okay. We're gonna come look for you then. We'll just say things into the microphone.
Speak loud. Yeah, it should pick it up.
All right,
We'll see.
we'll figure it out. If not, Dwight will take notes.
All the notes. That part. Pretty much this is what we discussed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's pretty much laid out for us on this meeting, luckily. Wow. Hello. Northeast.
Good.
Feel free to come closer if you'd like.
Yeah.
You know,
If
we don't have to talk too loud.
But then if you don't want me to hear, I'm giving you the opportunity to
That's
whisper.
true.
Fair.
I talk right here or something.
You thought everything. Don't consider.
But also gives us the opportunity.
Yeah,
And we're
that's
not-
what we're worried about. Yeah, well, we'll see if Janet's got this going. If not, I think everything's pretty much written out, so we'll get it figured out. So 6 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. And tonight is just a work session for the board. And that's why you don't see a lot of administration here and so forth. As we pursue a new superintendent, we have hired a wonderful firm, Human Capital. And this is Dr. Steve Webb for Mrs. Laura. This is one of our teachers. And then I think you met, oh, you did not?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm a business manager.
That's their business manager. So
Nice meeting you both.
they're good. And they're always at our meetings, so we love to have them here. And we're hoping more people show up, but maybe not. So the agenda is pretty short. We're gonna go through this document. I'm gonna hand that over to Steve, correct? Sure. You're gonna lead us through that document, and basically it's just to kind of walk us through some of the decisions that we need to make as a board. Some of the processes that we're gonna go through in the next couple of months. And answer any questions and provide any input to Dr. Webb, so. Steve, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dan. As first order of business, my assumption is we process things fairly informally in terms of names. So I'm Steve, and I'm delighted to partner on behalf of Human Capital Enterprises. President Hank Harris with the North Lake School District Board of Education in conducting this next superintendent search. You have in your packet previously provided quite a bit of detail. We do that predominantly for 2 reasons. We have 14 topics that we need to cover tonight. 6 of those topics, we will need some direction from the board around this evening. Most of the other topics is really an orientation around the search process itself. The last 5 topics on the outline in front of you, we won't go into great detail because we'll spend some time in subsequent meetings preparing for additional activities and reviewing that. But we always think it's really helpful to sort of touch, provide a touch point and highlight those in advance, so you get really the big picture of the entire scope of the search. Again, my name is Steve Webb. This is my 40th year working with public schools, 36 years as a high school teacher and coach, assistant principal, executive director, assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, and superintendent of schools of 2 school districts, one in Southern California, Apple Valley Unified, 2 hours due east of LA, high desert, 15,000 students, and Vancouver Public Schools on the north bank of the Columbia River, just across from Portland. Spent 15 years serving Vancouver as the superintendent successor and superintendent, retired in 2021. For the past 4 years, I've been working as an executive search associate with Human Capital Enterprises. And I have my own consulting practice, serve as an executive coach, senior advisor to companies in the K-12 space. And more recently, given some input from my wife, I've transitioned my consulting practice. When you start working more than full time and you're supposed to be semi-retired, she gave me some constructive criticism. So I've stepped away from some of my private practice, and really it gives me quite a bit of time to really focus my time and effort on supporting communities and school boards in superintendent searches. So I'm delighted to meet all of you in person, and I look forward to our work together. I thought it would be just real helpful if you would introduce yourself just quickly, a sentence or two about what motivated you to serve and how long you've served on the board, and then we'll dive right into the topics itself. So if you're comfortable, Mark, would you start?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been on the board 11 years. That anyhow started. It was something that resigned. Saw the need to probably step in, help out the community, so joined them, and anyhow, been through one superintendent search and looking forward to this one. I think we're on the right track already, getting off to a good start. Yeah.
Yeah, Preston Sedco. I was K-12 student in North Lake, and then graduated in 2009 and left the community for several ways, 12 years or so. I moved back, and some board members had been on for quite some time. We're getting ready to leave. I've got a bunch of kids. Figured it was time to get involved again in the school, and so in my first term, Dan and I came on at the same time.
Dan Jensen, on the board, I don't know, what, 3 years now?
I think we're the third year.
So, what motivated me, I guess, through the short straw is nobody else in the community. No, I have a little bit of background in education, so I thought maybe I could help out with some of the leadership of the school district. I've got a little one coming up through the schools too, so that was my motivation at the time.
Yep. Scott Duffner, let's see, been on the board 10+ years. I'm not positive how long, but 2 different tutors. Had some personal issues that had to take off for a bit, but started out like Mark. I believe I filled in a position that somebody resigned. I've had worked on 5th kid going through the school now. Yeah, it's just wanted to be part of the structure of
This one.
Yeah, so Dwight, and I've been the third graduating class from here. So the school was built at a community so. And then, yeah, joined the board when our oldest daughter was in kindergarten. She's been out of school a couple of years now, so, and in 2 years. Yeah,
Long service.
so, yeah,
I know this is often a selfless and thankless school. And I've worked with a variety of board directors throughout my career, and I just want to acknowledge your leadership on behalf of children and families in this community. It's valued, it's critically important for the future of this community, communities, and quite frankly, the state of Oregon and our great nation rests, in my opinion, on the foundation of public education as a cornerstone of our democracy. So I just want to acknowledge your leadership. Let's take a look at these topics here, and we'll dive right in. We should be able to complete this in about 60 minutes. Sometimes, depending upon questions and follow-up, it might take a little bit more time. But typically we're in the 60 to 90-minute range. That sort of sets expectations. One of the reasons that we provide this briefing memo and the detail in advance is to make sure that you're prepared. Oftentimes questions might surface, and if we don't provide all of this in written form, those questions will surface at some later point, and this becomes a reference point for you, so you have that as background information. So we're going to cover just quickly board human capital enterprises communication. We'll spend more time on the search timeline of activities. We'll need direction from the board on that topic. We'll cover community and stakeholder engagement. We have a recommendation regarding public disclosure of candidate names. We'll need direction from the board on that topic. We'll review superintendent search communications. The first search update is scheduled for release tomorrow. Provided a copy of that in an email to you this morning as a courtesy copy. That is distributed routinely to families and employees of the district. And we'll walk through what that schedule of updates looks like. We'll cover focus groups, 5 focus group roles. We'll need some direction on the board relative to internal candidates, if there are any. We'll need direction from the board on residency expectations. We'll talk just briefly about the protocol for prospect referrals. We'll need direction from the board on advertising. We have a recommendation for the board that was included in your packet. And then we'll cover quickly the following 4 or 5 topics. Finalist background checks, contract and salary range for the new superintendent, the format of board candidate interviews, candidate referencing, and then records retention. Those are asterisk because we will have time in advance of executing on these further in the process, time to deliberate a little bit more in detail. So those are the topics. That's the outline. Questions before we jump right in? Okay, let's get to it. I'm going to be working 2 monitors here. This is for my own background here as reference documents. All right, let's talk a little bit about a board and HCE communication protocol. We're going to follow your standard practice. We'll work through Janet as the district liaison and the executive assistant in terms of getting materials prepared and distributed. logistics with meetings, et cetera. Often you're gonna receive emails from me directly, and you already have. Okay? So please, if you can, check your emails daily. I know that that can be a challenge, but sometimes there's timely communication that we work really hard to provide well in advance information to the board so that you're well prepared when we need to engage in a conversation. But occasionally there may be an urgent email that we send, and if that's the case, oftentimes I'll either have the board chair or have the district liaison reach out by telephone call and say, hey, Dwight, you need to check your email because there's something urgent that just came in, okay?
Good.
Yeah. Email protocols, just a reminder, emails are subject to public disclosure, so please be thoughtful about what you put into email to me. If you have a sensitive topic that you want to discuss, I suggest that you call me on my cell, okay? Board members certainly can email me with questions. Please don't CC the whole board. If for some reason that happens, I ask that board directors not reply all. That has the potential to be a violation of the OPMA, okay? Our standard practice is to send the email to the board chair and BCC the board so that we don't invite reply all. Okay, and we'll continue to use that protocol. Later in the search process, when you have an opportunity to have access to the confidential applicant files, occasionally we'll receive an email from a board director about a specific question that might surface relative to a candidate's background. We always prefer to receive telephone calls, but if you do put something in an email, use their first initial for first name, initials for first and last name, so that we're not disclosing candidates' names in a public document. Okay? Questions about communication? Let's move into the search timeline of activities. I think in your packet you have a copy of the proposed timeline. I just want to give you sort of the big picture. The engagement phase begins tomorrow, January 6th through January 26th. The recruitment phase is January 27th through February 27th. So we have 4 weeks with recruitment activities. We've already sent out to the listserv yesterday a communication that provided an advanced teaser announcement on this particular superintendent vacancy. So that went out to our 40,000 listserv subscribers across the country. We'll make an additional announcement that is specific to this position on January 27th. Okay. The selection phase is February 28th through March 31st or April 7th, and we'll talk a little bit about trying to finalize what works best for you five. There's a spring break that happens in Oregon that last full week of March. So the tentative draft timeline has 2 options here, and I'll need some direction from the board. And then the transition phase begins in April, and we can certainly provide some support and advice to the board and relative to transition activities that could begin meet and greets in April and May, so that your next superintendent begins the onboarding process immediately after the public announcement and action on their contract. So if if we take a look at the dates that are critically important for you all, let me just highlight those for you. January 26th, a special board meeting regarding the next superintendent criteria and a public discussion of the salary range. That's required by Oregon code. So the question to you five is this: can everyone make that date work? That would likely be a remote meeting, a virtual meeting. You all might be here, but I will likely join you via Zoom. Does that not work for anyone? Let me reframe that question. Okay. March 9th is a regular business meeting. We're recommending a closed session where we would present a slate of candidates for the board's consideration. So you do your regular business meeting, you wrap that up, we transition and recess into an executive session or a closed meeting. We'll present the slate of candidates for the board to consider. Okay, I see heads nodding. So, all right. If it doesn't work, just shout out. March 17th and 18th, special board meeting for first round semifinalist interviews with the board. Now, we typically schedule those over 2 days. We can do those on one day. Those interviews are scripted and prepared with a set of questions that are aligned to your next superintendent criteria. HCE does all of that work. We usually begin the day with a 45-minute orientation with the board so that you have a sense of do's and don'ts in interviews. And then we invite our first candidate in. Those interviews are typically 50 to 55 minutes. And then we facilitate a debriefing process with the board that lasts somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes. So for every candidate and a comfort break, you can anticipate an hour and a half. About an hour for an interview, 20 minutes for a debrief, and a 10-minute comfort break. We usually recommend 5 to 7 candidates for first round interviews. Okay. Now that may depend upon the pool. And of course, when we present the slate, we'll have a better sense of what that will look like. But typically it's 5 to 7. So if you have 7 and they're each an hour and a half, we typically structure those over 2 days. If you have 4 candidates, we can compress it. Still makes it a pretty long day, but we can get it done in a day. Those interviews are done via Zoom for the board, for the candidates, and of course, Human Capital Enterprises will also facilitate that process. So the question is, do those dates work for the board? Well, or is, let me reframe that. Does that not work for any board director?
So I have a question. When you say that's Zoom, ideally we would be here all together, right? Or is it all right if some of the guys are here together and I'm somewhere else?
No, that's a great question, right? Actually, it works best if you're all in separate locations.
Oh, okay.
So that you're signing in on your.
So each got your own. That's better than Google.
And the reason for that is we want to replicate as much as possible, sort of a face-to-face experience. And if you're using a conference room, for example, or this space, and there are 4 people we've done it
Sure.
before that way.
But it loses.
But you lose the intimacy of seeing somebody's, face and the interaction, from an individual screenshot. Now, if there are some technical challenges that we need to attend to relative to that, we should probably know. And then I'll need to work with Janet so that we can get that, planned for well in advance. So, we've facilitated, first round interviews with board directors out of the country. Um, interviewing at 2 a.m. their time.
Are these typically done in like evening meetings like this, because you probably have some of your candidates are still currently in the school district, or are they typically midday? What's the kind of timing like on those typically?
We usually do those, our orientation meeting with the board typically begins either at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And then we follow up depending upon the number of candidates there during the course of the day. It's just more convenient for us to concentrate that time. And most of our candidates will be informed well in advance, and they can modify their work related commitments. We've never had a candidate say that doesn't work for them. Okay. So the question really is around the finalist or second round interviews. As I indicated, Oregon Spring Break is March 23rd through the 27th. So there's really two sort of proposed sequence of dates. The first is March 24th and 25th. That's a Tuesday and Wednesday. Those interviews are in person. So you'll have an opportunity to interact with candidates face to face. We typically like to schedule them on Tuesday and Wednesday. It gives me time to transition, drive, get everything organized. And then we begin usually early in the morning, again, with some planning time, dedicated planning time for the board. And then we jump right into the finalist interviews. Now, we usually set aside 2 days. We usually recommend 2 to 3 finalists. On occasion, we have boards say, we really are in love with 4. We'd really like to invite 4 back. These interviews are less structured. We'll talk about that as we get closer to that activity. But typically there are follow-up questions that it's more of a conversation. You're interacting with each of the finalists in a way so that you deeply learn everything that you need to know about them and their background and experiences in advance of deliberating all of the finalists together and making your final determination regarding the preferred finalist. Okay. And so you have some planning time so that you 5 are thinking strategically about what questions you want to ask as a follow-up to the first round interviews, a follow-up to something that you saw in background checks, follow-up to references. It's an opportunity for you to dig a little bit more deeply with the candidate themselves. Okay. So it's either March 24th, 25th, or March 31st, April 1st, which is a week later. So it really depends on the board's preference, Dan, and so we'll just need some direction from the board here on dates for the second round finalist interviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there concern, like if a board member cannot make some of these dates? Is there what's the concern? Just trying to give people some flexibility.
We have had on occasion, a board, director, board member who was traveling. And it's not impossible for, that board director to participate remotely via Zoom. We've done that before. It's a little clunky, but we can make it work. It's critically important, I think, and we always recommend that board directors try to block out those commitments and be present. Sometimes that's not possible. And when that happens, typically boards have some norms and protocols relative to supporting the decisions that the board is making when they're not present. So hopefully all five of you can block out those dates and participate. And if we need to have somebody work, Zoom in, we can work with Janet and try to make that happen. Again, you don't need to set aside both. It's either the 24th, 25th, or March 31st, April 1st. Any strong preference?
My only thought on that is 24th, 25th being spring break, the building would be empty, which may make it easier to have less disruptions where whether we've got students here. This is our room, library, so that's my thought.
Conference room.
Yes. So,
Except on Tuesday.
definitely Tuesdays.
They have other writing.
Okay.
Well, if March 24th, 25th works, in terms of sequencing, I know that the finalists would prefer not having an extra week to wait.
Oh, sure. Right.
Yeah,
The second date does not work for me. The 24th, 25th might. But I want to find it out. It's. Else.
So the 31st and 1st are out for you.
Yeah.
so it sounds like we're leaning towards the 24th, 25th. Okay. Know that we'll finalize this timeline and that gets published. It will be published to the North Lake School District Superintendent Search landing page that's ready to launch tomorrow. Janet has already prepared that. It will also get published to Human Capital Enterprises North Lake School District Superintendent landing page, because candidates will want to know what the timeline is. That's why we post them. From a public facing perspective, your constituents, your employees and families will also remain sensible. Okay. So you have a sense of what happens after you interview finalists. We again, similarly, we debrief each finalist separately, and then we'll do a debrief across all of the finalists, trying to get to some decision around who you would like to entertain as your next superintendent. Typically, the board then comes out into the public meeting and acts on authorizing either the board chair or board chair and vice chair to begin contract negotiations with the preferred finalist. That gives you a week to entertain those conversations, finalize terms, and then typically boards will schedule a special board meeting for the purpose of acting on the finalized contract and for announcing who the next superintendent is. And usually that's a big event. You know, you invite patrons, you invite families, you invite employees, and usually that person is in attendance, often with their family, depending upon the distance of travel. Okay, it's intended to be a celebration. Okay, so that's the sequence. Any questions about the proposed timeline? Super. All right,
So that's, just to be clear, that's a week in between the first round and that, which is Zoom, and the second finals is the in person. And that's fairly normal,
it is,
that 1 week.
it is.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. And so you know, when you're looking at that draft timeline, the selection and announcement likely would happen on March 31st. That just, we'd have to finalize the date of that special board meeting and the time. Since you're doing the second round interviews on the 24th, 25th. Okay. That's usually a 15-20 minute meeting. You know,
Gotcha.
some cake, punch, coffee, water bottles, lots of G-boy howdies. Yeah, absolutely, all of those.
Mark is a party planner, so.
Well, that's good to know. All right, let's transition to the next topic, which is community and stakeholder engagement. We included in your packet an FAQ document that recommends what are standard practices relative to the disclosure of candidates' names publicly. And our recommendation is not to disclose candidates' names publicly for all the reasons outlined in that FAQ document. At our planning meeting, Dan and Scott and I discussed that, and it was the consensus of those two that, yeah, we're not certain that there's an advantage to disclosing names of candidates publicly. In fact, there is a distinct disadvantage because it often has a chilling effect on the pool of applicants. It also can create advocacy and lobbying efforts that sometimes does not attend to the integrity, fairness, and equity in the process, which we outline in that FAQ. That's why our approach, we invest significantly in stakeholder engagement up front. So one-on-one interviews with each of you, one-on-one interviews with key leaders of the district, 5 focus groups by roles, and then a community-wide online survey. Those one-on-one interviews will begin tomorrow. Focus groups are scheduled or will be scheduled on the 12th and 13th, Monday and Tuesday of next week. The community-wide online survey will launch tomorrow. Students, secondary students will have an opportunity to complete that survey. All of your families, all of your employees, and any patron will have access to that survey. So the question here is, in light of our deliberations, Dan and Scott felt like the board needed to entertain that discussion more broadly around whether or not to publicly disclose names, and our recommendation is not to publicly disclose names.
Yeah, it seems like it would prevent somebody from wanting to apply if they're worried about not getting it, and then discussions if they turn sessions, so. Not advantageous.
That is a real concern for some sitting school boards.
Yeah, no, that's the kind of.
Especially, we have some larger pools we can get, because there's not. You get 6 to 7 normally, but 6 to 7 that want to come to North Lake is,
Be careful now, you're being recorded.
Well, let me clarify. We typically recommend to boards from the pool to interview 5 to 7 of the applicants for a first round interview. I've done some searches where I've had 50 applicants. I've done other searches where I've had 20 applicants. From the pool, given your board adopted next superintendent criteria, know that what Human Capital Enterprises does before the slate meeting is we review every single applicant's file and align that to the next superintendent criteria. And we make some professional judgments as a team. That's Hank and I on this search about which candidates are more strongly aligned, which candidates are closely aligned, which candidates are moderately aligned, and which candidates aren't aligned. Right? So if we have 20, we typically will sort in those 3 sort of strongly, closely, moderately, and not aligned. The not aligned, you'll have access to all of their materials, but we just have made a determination that they're not qualified. Okay, so we come forward with these are the tier 1 candidates, tier 2 candidates, tier 3 candidates. Other thoughts about that question around? Okay. Superintendent search communications, as I already stated previously, your first search update will be distributed tomorrow, January 6th. It provides an overview of the search process, announces the superintendent search survey opportunity and the survey link for parents and employees, and an opportunity to complete a focus group participant interest form. We conduct the lottery out of fairness and equity. So any employee that completes that interest form, and the lottery is conducted by Human Capital Enterprises. We just randomize, we use Google form. We just randomize, and the first 6 names that are sorted to the top are the 6 that receive the invitation to participate in the focus group by role. Okay. So all of that information will be distributed tomorrow in the first search update. There's a bunch of behind the scenes work that I have to do on the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, in order to get everything ready by the 12th and the 13th. But it's not my first rodeo. I've done this once or twice, and we pivot quickly.
Do you find that the lottery is the best? I was just thinking like for, like say a staff focus group or a teacher focus group. Won't there be higher value in having a more tenured member with more experience on and that's maybe had a variety of different superintendents they've worked under versus second year teacher that's coming in with less background knowledge?
We try to make sure that there's, and of course, the end of employees here is much smaller than Vancouver Public Schools. I get that. But we try really hard to make sure that there's broad representation within the 6. And know that every stakeholder has an opportunity to complete the survey and know that these are open-ended questions. I mean, you've seen them. And Hank and I, review every response. So no voice, will go unheard if they want to provide input. But we work really hard to make sure that there's, broad representation, so. There's some drop-down, choices for employees in that interest form. We want to make sure that we've got elementary, we want to make sure we got middle, and secondary students represented. Staff, I said students. Okay, your second search update will be distributed on January 27th. It will announce a board action on the board adopted next superintendent criteria and the launch of the recruitment phase. Your third update will be distributed on March 10th or 11th. And it informs the community that the board will interview semifinalists on March 17th or 18th. And again, it depends on the number of candidates that are advanced. And again, those names will not be disclosed, but we'll let the community know that you are beginning first round interviews. Search update number 4 will be distributed on March 19th or 20th, and it will inform the community that the board will be interviewing finalists on March 24th and 25th. And again, that depends on the number of candidates advanced. It will also speak about the reference and background checks, contract negotiations with a preferred candidate, and the date for board contract action and settlement announcement. And know that we have materials prepared for each one of these search updates. These are really the district communications. Most of our partner districts use the template, but oftentimes there will be a tweak or two, and Janet will be responsible for district communications. She's had the first search update well in advance, so she's had an opportunity to review that. It's ready to go tomorrow. The final search update will be distributed on March 31st. It will announce the next superintendent, provide a high-level overview of their background, typically includes a quote from the board chair and the next superintendent. It may also communicate planning around transition activities. That document is produced by the district. It's not produced by Human Capital Enterprise. It's sort of the press release. Okay. We can certainly help do that if you'd like for a small hourly fee, but we typically don't do that.
Our PR department's a little small.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you know, our standard practice is to provide an advance copy, typically 24 hours in advance to the board, so that you have that communication before it's released to your employees and to your community. Okay. Questions about communications? Nope. All right. Focus groups. At our planning meeting, Dan, Scott, and I discussed the 5 focus groups that are part of your contract. We landed on the following groups: administrators, licensed staff, classified staff, parents, guardians, community, and then secondary students. Working with Janet and building principal on identifying the secondary students. Should have hopefully that finalized by tomorrow. And then all of these focus groups are facilitated remotely. Okay. Again, your parent, guardian, community, that's via lottery. Classified employees via lottery, licensed staff via lottery. Okay. And you have a small administrative team, so very administrator.
They won.
Yeah. well, we expanded it a little bit. Business manager will participate, or then, yep. And she does not know this yet, but we'll spend a little bit of time after the focus group, because I have some questions about district fiscal health that I really need your support with. Okay. That'll be about a 20-minute conversation or more. Okay. And then I'm also doing a one-on-one interview with Janet. She seems to be the touch point for just about everything. So the survey is published in English and in Spanish. All of the communication will come out in English. Some districts like translation services to do both English and Spanish, but given conversation with Ann and Scott, we're just going to use Google Translate function in the web browser. That saves some costs for the district as well. Okay. Questions about focus groups? Okay. Topic 7 and 8, internal candidates and residency expectations. We're going to need direction from the board in a conversation with Dan and Scott at our planning meeting. Both of these are standard topics because often there might be an internal applicant or two, and or sometimes more than two, depending upon the size of the system. So we facilitate a conversation with the board at this planning meeting to really get a sense of how do you want the firm to manage internal applicants. And our recommendation always is, in the event that there's an internal applicant, that they're vetted in a similar process as the external applicants, so that they're part of the pool, right? Out of fairness, out of equity to all of the applicants, and really out of integrity to the process. Given all of the public engagement work we're doing, the board is acting on next superintendent criteria that we will present based on what we've heard from your stakeholders. So that's our recommendation. And the question is, and of course, we don't know at this time whether or not there's an internal candidate. Sometimes in some places, a board, there may have been a transition at mid-year. They might have taken an assistant superintendent or a high school principal and elevated them as an interim or acting superintendent. Then that becomes, that's not the case here. But oftentimes boards will want to have a conversation around how do we manage that process if we have an interim and they might be a potential applicant. So the question is,
If they were to apply, run them through the same process.
is he nodding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay. And then residency expectations. And again, and given the conversation that Dan and Scott and I had earlier, in the nature of the housing market, that might be a challenge. Some boards expect the superintendent to reside within the geographic attendance area of the district. And so the question here is, do you have any expectations around that as a board?
Personally, I do not. But
Yeah, I think we've got another staff coming out of Pine. Dave stayed on Pine a couple times this year, right?
add two months.
Yeah, a part of it, that in place too. Out here.
Yeah,
Kind of somewhat similar to what you know.
I like we need a. We preferred, obviously, but not. Not required, especially because it's kind of. Aggressive and.
Yeah.
Or,
I don't prefer it, but I can see where it's not totally feasible. And I think it detracts from your engagement on it and everything else in there on, or in a hurry to get out of here.
Yeah.
Every Thursday afternoon. Come back, and then I think they move quite a bit.
Yeah.
Of community support.
yeah, I appreciate that point of view. And clearly, if someone is looking to, you know, get out of town as quickly as possible for the 3-day weekend. Because you're operating on a 4-day calendar, right? Yeah.
But we frequently have stuff here on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, for sure.
That,
Yeah, for sure.
have time.
Yeah, and often I would advise boards then to be really clear about what their expectations are relative to goal prioritization as part of the work in evaluating the superintendent. So you communicate those expectations. We expect you to be integrated and a central figure in this community. And that means on Friday night, you're at football meets, you know, or a basketball game, or, you know, we have those kinds of expectations relative to a positive, visible leadership presence in our community. And then you evaluate whether or not.
So when does that? When does that thought get put into the process? I mean, is that something that we'll have written up here in a little while, or is that part of the interview process? When does that expectation get presented to them?
As I just suggested or outlined, that usually is part of the goal deliberation between your superintendent once they're on board and the board. Typically, that happens in almost every district sometime either in late summer, August, or early fall. You identify expectations, goals for the year. Okay. Yeah, it might be, if the board has enough energy around that, it might be something that you entertain with a district legal relative to specifying an expectation as a goal within the contract. Not necessarily that you need to reside in the community as a function of employment, but an expectation that they're a positive, visible presence in the community. They're integrated into the community regardless of residency.
Yeah.
And I often see those kind of
See that.
expectations identified in some contracts.
That's all kind of the hiring process. So I think to your point, it'd be good to get that expectation in front of, like during the interview process, just. Right, the interview process is just as much the candidate deciding whether or not we're a fit for them as it is us deciding whether they're a fit for us. And if that's something that they're gonna say, well, no, I'm gonna live in Bend and I'll be out there Monday to Thursday from 7 to 4:30, then we can just decide right there. That's.
Yeah, and I think, you know, certainly if that is a shared interest by the 5 of you, when we have time together in advance of those finalist interviews, that surfaces as a key follow-up question. Yeah.
It does place some limitations on your candidates. You could have some pretty good candidates that fail because of that, and then you don't have any, you know, strong candidates left, because you put that on and. You
But
know,
are they a strong candidate if they don't want to be, but I mean,
yeah,
That's something we could weigh out at that
Yes.
point.
yeah.
So I could see it right until then.
Do you have a strong leader that can set things in motion and go, or do you have a more visible presence in the community? And Yeah, those are,
Yeah, maybe you've got a principal or athletic director that can kind of fill the shoes of that presence, but.
And that, again, you don't have to make that determination tonight.
Okay.
However, I think you're gonna learn through this engagement, listening work. What the expectations are of your employees and the community are relative to the next superintendent. And that may surface as a high priority, and if it does, it'll be reflected in the next superintendent criteria. And then we begin framing all of our evaluation of all of the candidates relative to that criteria. Right? Questions that are prepared. Every candidate will review that next superintendent criteria. And we field calls from candidates like, what are the top 2 or 3 priorities here? And we frame it, and we're really explicit because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're presenting candidates that are aligned to the values of the board and this community, and candidates know what to expect, right? Because it's about fit and match. We don't want to take a, round or a square peg and try to fit it into because that does not work well for anyone. And it does not serve anyone's interest, including the interest of the children of the school system.
it's just a unique problem, because we are 2 hours from anywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those.
Yeah, you don't just live in the next town over this.
You're in Bend and you gotta get here, we're waiting 2 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Understood. Well, thank you for that direction. Prospect referrals. From this moment forward, Human Capital Enterprises were your search consultants. Okay. So we ask that you not engage with staff or community about prospect names. Right? Somebody might come up to you and say, Dwight, Scott, Mark, Preston, Dan, so-and-so, Pine would be somebody you ought to talk to. Right? Our standard advice to board directors is that, when you get that, invite them to contact me with that information. It's an easy handoff. Hey, thank you for that name. I want to encourage you to send Steve at humancapitalenterprises.com an email with that referral. And every time I get an email from anyone about a prospect, I always respond. And I'm usually, unless I'm tied up in business meetings, I usually respond within 24 hours. So receive and refer. Okay. It gets out of the lobbying, advocacy, access, special treatment because so-and-so knows Dwight and, they get the whole history of this person's work and whatever role they're in currently. Okay. Questions about that? All right, advertising. We'll need some direction here. Human Capital Enterprises, we manage all of the postings. You've got a recommendation in your packet. That recommendation includes posting to COSA, which is really the go-to site in Oregon for school administrators. That's their job board. OSBA, Oregon School Boards Association. There's no cost to member districts. I'm assuming you're a member of OSBA. WASA, which is the equivalent of COSA north of the river. There's no cost to posting that to the WASA job board. And then WASA, which is the equivalent of OSBA, which is the School Directors Association in Washington State. So we would post the vacancy to those four locations. And of course, as you know, we publish that and distribute the posting through our own national listserv where we have 50,000 subscribers. There is a small anticipated fee for COSA that we would invoice for separately. That's $300. So the direction is, are you comfortable with that additional cost?
Why is there no fee for those?
Because COSA charges for that posting.
We pay an annual fee for postings for the.
Okay. If you pay an annual fee, it may not require an additional cost.
Steve, what about Idaho?
We could certainly explore Idaho, if that's the board's interest. Occasionally, when we're doing an Eastern Washington search, we'll post to Idaho. I can't recall if there's a small fee for the Idaho Administrative Association, but I can certainly fact find and let you know.
Yeah.
Align with us a little bit.
Just
Okay.
just get a chance to pull somebody from there and maybe Washington.
I mean, it's a different world there. You can, Mark can be a superintendent. No offense. No, I'm just saying, if they can just step right into the role and not have the credentials that we do in Oregon. So I didn't know if that was gonna be a barrier for some candidates, because we have much more tighter.
Yeah, the licensure for administrative superintendent roles in Oregon does meet some challenges sometimes. Washington does not require a superintendent credential. You do have to have an administrative credential. There's two different licenses. In Oregon, there's just one administrative license. So there are some challenges, but if Idaho is something that you're interested in having us opposed to, we'll explore it, and if there's a cost.
Take a look.
Yes,
That's my only fear, is if they're gonna have too many barriers to want to come here anyhow, so. I'm gonna spend a lot of money.
okay, so I will let you know tomorrow about that.
Okay.
So follow up. All right. Finalist background checks. Let me just say our recommendation is to conduct a comprehensive background check on finalists. That includes criminal, civil, credential verification, media, stories, and social media. We use a third-party investigative firm to do that. The cost of that is $11.75 for each background check. And so we'll need some direction. We don't know how many finalists. Usually takes somewhere between 4 and 9 days for the firm that we work with to pivot. Once we get all of the credentialing information to the firm, we can expect to get their comprehensive background check within 4 to 9 days. So if we're making that decision, looking at the calendar on who to advance on March 18th, and you're doing finalist interviews on the 24th and the 25th, we typically will have those background checks completed and posted for your review. You certainly will have them before you make any final determination on awarding a contract. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, our recommendation is to conduct those. Are you comfortable with that additional cost? If you are advancing 2, it's $23.50.
Yet we can't put a person in charge of our students without a background check.
Yep.
That's,
Know that, we do as part of our vetting process, you'll see the 2 letters of recommendation that each candidate submits as part of their application. HCE will conduct one preliminary reference call for those candidates that are strongly aligned and closely aligned to the next superintendent criteria. So you'll see our notes from that reference call. And then we also do a preliminary media search. We typically will do a Google search. We'll go 10 pages deep. If we find any news story or any post that would be important for the board to be aware of, you'll have access to that information, and we'll post that. You can go right to the link. All of this is done through our secure HR digital platform. And I don't want to get into too much of the weeds on that right now, but you'll have access to everything that I see. You'll see on every candidate, but whether they're strongly aligned or not aligned. Okay. In addition, finalists, we recommend 6 reference calls on each of the finalists. The distinction between the reference call and the letters of recommendation, these are candidate provided letters of recommendation. They give us the name of somebody, we always recommend a supervisor that they would like us to contact confidentially. Okay. When we get to the finalists references, we populate the names and the roles. We don't ask, we populate. Okay. So for example, we almost always call 2 board directors, or at least 1 board director if the person is a building principal and they're being elevated, they're looking for an elevated role as a superintendent. Usually the business manager or the finance person of the district or of the school. Oftentimes we'll contact somebody that is familiar with special services. We identify a specific set of roles, and then we populate the names and the contact information from publicly available information given the candidate's background. And occasionally we'll go not just to their current employer, but oftentimes we'll go to the second, their second most recent. So we invite board directors to make those calls. You don't have to make that determination now, but be thinking about whether or not you're comfortable doing that. They typically take 30 to 45 minutes. We have a standard form. We prepare that for you. We prepare the call list. We try to make it as painless as possible, but you still have to commit 30 to 45 minutes per reference call. If you have 2 finalists and we're making 6 calls for each, it's 12 calls. You have 5 directors. 2 of you are going to have to make 3. Okay, but we find that boards learn a great deal by speaking with references in the district or the employer of the candidate. Okay. Okay. We can certainly do that. I have had one search I did last year where a board said, we'd rather have you do it, and we can do it. But there's a fee for that, because that's not within the scope of the contract. Okay. All right. Contract and salary range for the new superintendent. We're going to spend more time at our January 26th meeting discussing this topic. As I said previously, Oregon code requires this to be agendized and discussed in the public meeting. Human Capital Enterprises has already requested a salary comp study from COSA and R2 Consulting. They're really the state experts here in Oregon. And I understand from Dan that there were some contract provisions that needed to be reviewed, and so Dan has already contacted legal. Yep, so that's well underway. All right, we want to try to get all of that finalized, because one of the questions that will be asked at some point, it's usually not the first, but it will be a question. Prospects, potential applicants will want to know what the salary range is, which is why we want to get that finalized before we launch the recruitment phase, which starts January 27th. Okay.
Just to be clear, what he was talking about with those contract provisions, those are what Gail brought forward from the R2 study when she did the salary range for her. And then she said there were some changes to the contract that she would like to see. So I was sending that to Elliot to make sure that we're in compliance with whatever legal requirements we have to be, and that's the scope of the changes to the contract.
What's Elliot's last name?
Field.
I don't know. Okay, great. Let's see, topic 13, format of board candidate interviews. I think I've already given you sort of a high level. First round, set of scripted questions aligned to the board adopted next superintendent criteria. Second round, more informal, with some planning time for the board to identify follow-up questions that you'd like to explore with the candidate together. At the very end of both, we provide time set aside for the candidate to use as they see fit. Oftentimes in the first round, it's a question or two that they might pose for the board. In the final round, could be a follow-up with additional questions. We've seen candidates also present entry plans to the board, like, this is my 90-day plan, thinking about what I know are the challenges and opportunities for the next superintendent, given conversations that we've had in the community as part of the engagement phase work. Okay. Finalists referencing, that's topic 14 we discussed, and the last item topic is records retention. I think I sent some of this to you in advance in an email. We'll review in greater detail at the conclusion of the search what our dispensation protocol is, but we're required by law to retain application and employment material for candidates. And so we have a process that we'll review at the very end. But as a rule of thumb, any document that is specific to a candidate, any notes that is specific to a candidate, that's a public record. Any interview questions and notes that, not public record, but employment record. That's an employment record. So we'll speak to that at the very end. The documents that you have here, your oftentimes board members will create a file and they'll just put all their papers in that file. And at the very end, we ask that we collect all of those. We'll provide some direction to Janet so that she can, shred the ones that aren't employment records and then ship back to us all of the employment records that we're required to maintain. And those get shipped back to our Southern California office. Okay. Are there other topics that weren't agendized that you would like to discuss, or you have follow-up questions for me?
pretty thorough.
Yeah.
It's-
Spelled out.
Are you glad that I didn't assign you to do this?
Yeah. I've been on Craigslist posting, you know. That's what I was saying.
Well, we take, you know, as Dan and Scott, we take great pride in our work. And, you know, we're a small boutique firm. We have, I think we're up to 10 associates now. And most of our work is really based in Oregon and Washington State. It's been described by, our work has been described by other board members as sort of the platinum service approach. You know, we really pay attention to detail. You know, I'm available, you know, pretty much 24/7. I do sleep on occasion. But if you have a question or you want to talk to me about something, don't hesitate, you know, pick up the phone and make it a call. And I will guarantee that I will respond as quickly as practical. It might be, hey, I've got a full day today, but take a look at your calendar, give me a couple of time slots for tomorrow, and let's get something scheduled. So I look forward to working with you and meeting your staff and employees, and you know, having an opportunity to engage in some conversations with some of your students. It's always the highlight for me. Yeah. So with that, Dan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Okay.
The only other item we had was public comments, so public, is there any comment?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I have the opportunity to be here and hear this, so thank you.
Good. Well, we definitely need leadership from the staff, so anything you can do to help rally that, that'd be great. You know, I think the worst thing that could happen is we have these focus groups and only one or two people show any interest, and that'll be frustrating, but. Well, good. Anything else?
Another question for Steve, on the calendar, and we probably already went over this, but coming up, is there anything scheduled that you'll be back down here during the focus groups for that, or that's all gonna be on the Zoom format?
Yeah, it's all done remotely.
Okay,
Yeah. Really, the next time I will be here in person, for contract would be the finalist interview. So most of my interfacing will be done remotely via Zoom. On occasion, we've had boards request presence at the slate meeting in person. You know, I'm certainly available, but you know, there will be an additional fee if I'm
Right.
driving here.
okay,
Okay,
thank you.
and we do most of those remotely.
Is there any, as far as the different, I guess, licensure, I guess, does that, like special ed director and all that, is that part of the, we say what we're looking for there, or?
Yeah, well, part of the one-on-ones, we'll talk a little bit, that third question really gets at specifically, what are the desired qualifications, experiences, leadership dispositions, traits, personal qualities that you'd like to see in your next superintendent. We've had, and what we do is we use, you know, the first two questions that we pose really are getting a sense of, you know, what's going great in North Lake School District that you want to amplify, you want to sustain, because candidates are going to want to know that, right? Candidates are also going to want to know what are the challenges, which is that next question. What are the challenges and opportunities for the next superintendent? because that helps inform their deliberations as part of their consideration on whether or not they want to be an applicant, right? And then that third question that we pose, and this is across every engagement activity, whether it's a one-on-one with you folks, whether it's one-on-one with Janet, or the focus groups, the online, they're the same questions, and we do that by design. Okay. But that third question is really getting at the goals piece. We have, and then what we do is we make sense of all of that, and then we identify a draft document that we call the next superintendent criteria. That becomes the marching orders once you finalize and adopt it. At the January 26th meeting, we'll review that together. And there may be something that, Mark, you feel strongly about that isn't quite clearly articulated sufficiently for you in that document. It's your document. So, it's at that point that you would need to advocate, and then together we reach consensus on how to respond to that interest. And we make those revisions in real time. I'll just pull the document up. You might make a comment about a specific qualification. We'll punch that in. I highlight that. And then we deliberate until we make a determination as a team about how that gets integrated or not. But once that's finalized by the board, then that becomes our marching orders. That's how we go about recruiting, and it's how the board goes about evaluating each applicant towards those criteria that have been finalized by the board. And I have had in one search a board include some specific language that speaks to an experience that surfaced as a concern or a challenge and an opportunity. I'll just be specific about what that language was. That the board wanted someone that had served as a building principal. And oftentimes, those kinds of interests sometimes show up as a challenge or a challenging opportunity section. Not always, but sometimes.
It's just, I think what Mark was getting at, some of our current superintendent funding is special ed assignments.
Yeah.
Funding, so I don't know if there's any
Yeah,
notifications or any.
So you have to have somebody else on staff. Anyhow, just
Yeah.
what we're looking, what
Notice-
we need is.
So good concern.
Small district, lots of Passover.
Yeah. Okay.
Or something.
So Steve, if I'm correct, there isn't much on the schedule in February, is that right? Busy in
Not for
January,
you,
busy in
but for, yes,
January, and there's no-
January and March
Okay.
are the heavy lifts for the board. February, that's a fun's work. We're really busy now. Perfect. All right.
It's not in June or July, we don't have anything else. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else? Good in the order? Well, this is adjourned.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for making the drive.
Yeah, I'm heading home.
Not the best morning to think.
Yeah, I stayed at in Black